You might take a look at India. For thousands of years, they've remained at a stagnation level under their dietary limitations. Thousands of years ago, the rulers noted that they didn't have enough land to graze cattle, so they made it a religious law that you couldn't eat animals. And they sat back in their castles and opulent living style and ate the meat themselves. But anyway, to find out if you have the brain wattage required to get into breatharianism, you'll be required to listen to your body. And if you get truly hungry, for example, you'll know that your body requires food. It takes a while to break in, a couple of years. This sounds like maybe silly, perhaps, but very few persons today listen to their body and their brain feedback. They listen to the minds, which constantly bring in memory pattern. One mind in particular constantly feeds in sensation, craving patterns to the brain. It loves the sensations of chocolate and ice cream and all the yummy junk foods. And it'll hit the memory patterns for such foods at the slightest frustration or opportunity. And anytime you get such patterns, you can quickly determine the source. Ask yourself or your body whether you're truly hungry or not. You'll get a true stomach hunger or you won't. And when you start listening to your body, you can get to the point that you know what kind of food you truly need. Well, this is a photo of Fräulein Neumann, who was a German woman that was a breatharian for 30 years. She never had any food or drink. And she was a stigmatist. In other words, she bore the marks and wounds of the Passion of Christ on her hands. And during her life, she saw throngs of curious persons flock to her, and the Good Fridays out of the year when she bore these marks. Many persons were around her for days and weeks. Proved that she took no food. Alfred B. Glazier, the author of the Modern Human courses that we'll keep speaking about, was a person that visited her and spent time with her in Germany when he was there during the war. Now, Fräulein Neumann could not do hard physical labor on her diet of nothing, of air. And she aged. There are other breatharians that kept their youthful period and their looks. And in 1936, there was a woman called Bali Devi in India. And she was 68 at the time of her interview and press release. And she had not eaten for 56 years. And she reportedly looked like a child. Well, in the same general area of thought, people have long searched for the fountain of youth, and potions and lotions to make them young again. And the nearest thing to such elixirs have come through alchemical formulations, according to reports. Yet there was a case that occurred in South Africa that still encourages persons to seek a more natural formula. It seems a chief of the Swazi nation named Umbandine was given a simple formula that had been handed down by his father before him. Well, this smooth white paste and herbs was given to the chief's wives every 10 years to keep them young. And when a couple of the whites stumbled upon and questioned the chief's actions, he simply proved it to them by rejuvenating a 40-year-old white woman acquaintance named Miriam Venter. Seeing 18 years suddenly disappear off her age, the men were about to round up the ingredients from the chief when he was killed before they could get the entire formulation. And oddly enough, remember, this formula only worked on females. Now, certain natives in South America's interior are said to have rejuvenation formulas. But so many of them have been killed off in recent years, the possibilities of ever gaining the secret are very slim. Now, we've been covering some very strange territory here. And of all the legends of strange humanoid creatures on this planet, probably the strangest are those of the carrot people or the plant and tree people. Now listen up. Supposedly, some 9,000 years ago, there were still a few isolated groups of these creatures who greatly resembled humans, but internally took after the plant kingdom. And instead of being born in the womb, they had rudimentary roots going from the lower extremities, and instead of hair, a fine plant-like growth. Believe it or not, J.R.R. Tolkien, the great author, mentions a larger race of these people in his Lord of the Ring books. And in his trilogy called these people the Ent people. And he was said to have gained his data and sources and references for his book, The Lord of the Rings, in the British Museum manuscripts, very, very ancient manuscripts like the Red Book of Clonenrod. And most of the species were very small, though. And it was said that a few existed. And there are still some of the small species in the New Guinea jungle. Now, according to the rumors and legends, the native tribes have long had a dislike for them. They've dug them up and killed the young. And they've seen and run across these little top notches. They're growing out of the ground like carrot tops. Believe it or not, I do not know. All I know is that the legends are there and the stories are there. And where there's a legend and story, there's often a bit of the truth. In the last of Tolkien's Lord of the Ring trilogy, you'll find a section that's called Section A that tells about the Ent history. Well, we've already covered the Bigfoot and the abominable snowman, but few persons have ever heard of another strange caveman species that lives only in the Northlands. And cavemen and primitive races have always existed, living right alongside the advanced civilization. Here's a depiction of a 310-pound specimen that the Russians actually found in remote Tibetan mountains in the early 80s. And they're still studying him. A true caveman living right among us. And in the Yakutat region of North Siberia, the natives have often seen the Chuchuna, and some have been killed for thievery. Well, these Stone Age men are also found in southeast Siberia, and they're called Mulen, and given the new settlers there a hard time back when the Russian Civil War existed and the settlers were coming into that area. Regular wars going on. And in a book entitled Still Living by Myra Shackley, this archaeologist gathered evidence that Neanderthal-like humanoids are still surviving in the most secluded parts of the North. Well, how many different species of Homo sapien were around 20,000 years ago or so is anybody's guess. And there are skeletal remains from a few inches to almost 20 feet high. And quite a few of these unique specimens are still running around this planet. And in the past, there were occasional stories about how these wild men would come out of the hills and just wreak havoc to civilized people and their games. And true or not, we'll never know. Now, because dealing with bizarre subjects like this sometimes tends to bring in other dimensional spirits and sometimes even negative spirits, we should cover here a little bit of defense. Seldom recognized that a human can send out the energies through the eyes and so-called chakras, and sometimes